Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole, and I'm the Parent Support Worker for the Niagara Catholic District School Board EarlyON Child and Family Centers. I'm here today for our weekly coffee and conversation in which all parents, grandparents, guardians, and caregivers are welcome. Our program topics revolve around ensuring you feel well, confident, and present in your parenting or caregiving role. As always, if you are unable to sit with me now, you are welcome to warm up your coffee and sit with me at a later, more convenient time. Our video content is available on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, so be sure to follow and subscribe to stay up to date with our videos. Last week, we focused on your stress. I encourage you to find at least one healthy coping strategy. I'm going to try using an all-natural muscle melt cream that I got for Christmas on my shoulders when I feel stress coming on. The smell too seems calming to me, so while I'm not excited for my next stressful experience, I'm excited to test out this coping strategy. In addition to understanding your own stress, last week we considered why we focus on our children's stress and the physiology of stress as well. So today we are going to look at the developmental considerations for reducing stress. The developmental overview will be split into 3 parts. Today, part 1 will review social emotional development, self-regulation, and attachment. Next week, part 2 will consider temperament and gender differences. And the last week, part 3, will consider self-esteem and resilience. In order to effectively reduce stress for our children, it's important that we understand some of those developmental capacities and the needs of young children at different ages. So it's important to remember that development is not a consistent process. Sometimes children seem to make great strides forward and then they regress somewhat before they master a skill. You may have seen this while potty training your children. It's not always rainbows and butterflies when your child starts using the toilet. They're great for a whole month, and then you bring them to your boss's house for a party and they have an accident all over their new dress. This developmental continuum is true of all types of developmental processes. And age isn't the guideline here. There can be large psychological and developmental differences between children of the same chronological age. I'm sure you'll know this if you've had multiple children. One of your children might start talking very early, and then your second might start much later. So this 3-part developmental focus will just give you some background knowledge to support your understanding of your child's stress. So let's start with a review of the developmental pieces that we've discussed in the past: social emotional development and self-regulation. In Kids Have Stress Too, we are reminded that children rapidly develop their abilities to experience and express different emotions. Quoting the program here, building on the foundations that were established during infancy, children mature and develop a better understanding of the range of emotions. They also begin to develop the capacity to manage and regulate their feelings, which is one of the most important and challenging tasks of early childhood. It's common and often expected for children 2.5 to 5 years old to have mood swings, upsets, tantrums, and fears. Young children who often don't yet have the vocabulary to express their feelings express their frustration and anger by crying, yelling, or having a tantrum. Children need to experience these normal human emotions so they can learn how to manage them. This quote relates to what we've discussed in the past as being super important. You have a role in supporting your child's vocabulary and expressing their emotions, but you also have a role in allowing them to feel those emotions to learn how to manage them. As we've discussed in the past, having an emotionally aware, responsive, and consistent caregiver is an essential part of our children's social and emotional development. Kids Have Stress Too tells us how important the bond between the parent and child is. While citing research, they mention that a weak mother-child bond can negatively influence a child's ability to manage their reactions to stress. Likewise, social emotional connectedness and support from caregivers can actually reduce the physiological stress response that we spoke of last week. Similarly, self-regulation is the ability to manage those feelings, thoughts, and actions in ways that help us meet our higher goals. Like social emotional development, self-regulation development is a lifelong process, but it begins with the external regulation from a caring parent, the maturation of the brain, and the child's lived experiences. As I've mentioned in the past, self-regulation is not something that spontaneously develops. It is supported and learned within a positive social context, which often begins at home. Quoting Kids Have Stress 2 program here, helping children deal with stress and supporting their emerging ability to manage their own stress is a very important aspect of supporting their capacity for self-regulation. With appropriate care, support, modeling, and teaching, 3 to 5-year-old children can begin the process of learning to regulate their emotional responses and thereby reduce their stress response. The relation between self-regulation and stressors was reviewed in previous weeks of Coffee and Conversation. If you're interested in this topic, I invite you to check out my video called What is Self-Regulation Anyways? And Self-Regulation Strategies. It makes sense that managing our stressors would be difficult, if not impossible, without the ability to have influence over our emotions, behaviors, and actions. We can't expect our children to know how to calm themselves down in a stressful situation if they are unable to recognize that they are at a heightened state and in need of managing the associated behavior. We've looked at both of these concepts. Your child's development of social, emotional, and self-regulation support their ability to manage their stress. We know that these things do not develop overnight, and we know that we have a part in supporting this development. Fostering that development will be an important part of reducing our kids' stress. One thing these things have in common is the parental influence. And what we haven't talked about yet is attachment. Attachment between you and your child will also have an influence in reducing their stress. So let's consider why. Attachment refers to the trust and security that children have with you. A child's strongest attachment is typically to their parents. This makes sense. A parent takes care of the child's needs by feeding them, loving them, keeping them safe, and comforting them in times of distress. A securely attached child will understand that if they venture off to explore their surroundings, they'll be comforted when needed. The study of attachment is very complex, and it changes throughout development, so giving examples of secure versus insecure attachment won't be very helpful because attachment will look different at all different developmental stages of the child's life. However, we do know that positive attachment will provide a foundation for developing a sense of confidence and self-efficacy, expressing curiosity and eagerness to explore, regulating emotions and behaviors, which keeps our concepts connecting, developing social competence and positive relationships with others, including their peers, and finally having the capacity to build secure and lasting relationships throughout life, including with their own children. So to deepen our understanding of attachment, I will use an article by caringforkids.cps.ca in a section called Information for Parents from Canadians Pediatricians. They mention that attachment occurs quite naturally as an infant's needs are met by the parent. The baby begins to trust the parent and therefore depends on them for comfort and safety. And you actually begin reducing your child's stress by learning what they need, knowing when to feed them, change them, soothe them, etc. All of these things reduce the stress that they are experiencing. So for our real little ones, you'll notice how their attachment is changing alongside their development. By 4 weeks, your baby will respond to your smile, perhaps with a facial expression or a movement. By 3 months, they will smile back at you. By 4 to 6 months, they will turn to you and expect you to respond when they're upset. By 7 or 8 months, they will have a special response just for you. They may also at this time be upset with strangers. And your baby may also start to respond to your stress, anger, or sadness. So we know that this early relationship is important through the work of the Alberta Brain Story, who said, and I quote, "Serve and return occurs when a parent or caregiver is responsible to a child's verbal cues and actions or responsive to a child's verbal cues and actions So by providing positive feedback through eye contact, sound, words, and physical interaction, the adult helps spark the child's interest and enthusiasm in practicing things like speech, language, and social learning. One of the researchers included in the brain story training joked that babies learn to smile back at the very most appropriate age. Once the parents are feeling at their wits' end that they've poured every ounce of themselves into their baby without much in return for around 3 months, it can start to feel really draining. And then you get that smile, and it all seems worth it to keep going. If you're interested in this serve and return concept and how early interactions between young children and their parents or caregivers are essential in promoting healthy brain development, I'm going to link below a video that discusses this further. Back to Kids Have Stress 2, as our babies get older, the program provided a few helpful tips for ensuring attachment. For example, it's helpful when parents prepare their children for transitions, especially when you have to leave the child. If they respond quickly and sensitively to children's emotional needs, which would include teaching them about those emotions that they're feeling, and to be there in comforting and affectionate ways as they go through these wild developmental changes. You really have to think about how stressful it must be, even just to go through these developmental changes. Imagine we went through these as adults. What if I just cried loud for all to hear whenever my coffee order was wrong? And then the people around us would look at us in dismay like, what on earth is this lady doing? This is not the expected behavior. I'd not only be upset about my coffee, but I'd be upset for being reprimanded for having this deep, complex feeling. It's confusing. It's important to be patient and understanding of these developmental changes and support them in the best way that you can. This week and the next two, I'm going to attach a handout about what to expect in your child's development as provided by Caring for Kids, CPS. And CPS stands for the Canadian Pediatric Society. If you'd like to refer to it for your children between the ages of 3 months to 4 years, it's a good reference. We are available to answer questions about your child's development, or we are able to help direct you to the appropriate support if needed. If you're ever concerned or curious about your child's development, there is no shame in asking questions. That's why we're here, albeit virtually for now. In addition, there is a wonderful resource called the Early Years Check-In. It is a tool of 11 items relating to social, emotional, language, movement, thinking, and learning skills. It gives an opportunity to document how you feel about your child's development in these areas, and it then generates steps that you can take to foster their development through expert-reviewed games and activities. So I will attach the link to this resource as well. Next week, we will continue our conversation of developmental capacities related to experiencing and dealing with stress. To further understand the ways our children experience stress, we will consider temperament and gender differences. As a reminder, if you're interested in participating in an interactive parent workshop on Kids Have Stress 2, please email me at nicole.mansell, M-A-N-S-E-L-L, at ncdsb.com, and we can add you to our list. Please be on the lookout for our next Mindful Mini activity coming tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk to you soon.